My name is Emma Hart, and I'm 47 years old. The day I walked through the iron gates of that mansion, I had exactly $46 in my purse, a broken down car 2 blocks away, and a prayer echoing silently in my heart. I didn't come looking for miracles, just a job. But what I found behind those carved mahogany doors was a battlefield dressed in silk and wealth. Mr. Blake Callahan, yes, that Blake Callahan, the ruthless millionaire CEO of Callahan Industries, was standing by the grand staircase, holding a tablet like it was a weapon. And at his feet, 2 7-year-old twins, James and Lily, glaring at me like I was their next victim. "You're the new nanny?" Blake's voice was as cold as the marble floors. "I'll do my best," I said, forcing a smile. He didn't smile back. "You'll last 3 days, tops." Apparently, no nanny had lasted a full week. The last one left in tears after day 2. Another claimed she saw pure evil in the twins' eyes. But I wasn't afraid. I had faced worse: divorce, betrayal, debt collectors, and a life that fell apart overnight. Still, nothing prepared me for what I was about to face. Those children weren't just wild, they were broken. And beneath all his expensive suits and sharp words, so was Blake. It wasn't just a job, it was a test. And when the truth came out, when I did what no one ever dared to do, it wasn't just the twins who changed. It was all of us. The mansion was a fortress of silence. Everything was polished to perfection: crystal chandeliers, endless hallways, and windows taller than trees. But it all felt hollow, like a museum no one dared to touch. Maria, the housekeeper, was the first to show me around. She was in her 60s, soft-spoken, and had eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. "Stay away from the East Wing," she whispered as we passed a locked door. "And if the twins go quiet, that's when you worry." In the playroom, James was dismantling a toy robot with a screwdriver, while Lily colored furiously outside the lines. They didn't even glance at me. "Why are you here?" James asked without looking up. "Because I need this job," I replied honestly. Lily finally spoke. "Everyone leaves. Or cries." "I don't cry easy," I said. Blake Callahan was a mystery himself. He left early, returned late, barely spoke unless it was about logistics, meetings, deadlines, control. But I saw the framed photo in his office, a woman with kind eyes and soft curls, his late wife, Hannah. Maria confirmed it later. She passed 2 years ago. Since then, he buried himself in work. The children stopped speaking for months. No one in that house believed love could survive there anymore. But I knew something they didn't. I knew how silence could turn into screams. I knew how broken hearts disguise themselves as tantrums. And I knew somehow that these kids didn't need another rule book. They needed to be seen. And so did Blake. On the 3rd day, I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. James had thrown a vase at the wall. Lily was curled up in the corner, arms over her ears, whispering something I couldn't hear. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten timeouts or consequences. I walked straight into the chaos, knelt beside Lily, and asked, "Do you want to draw with me?" James stood frozen. "Aren't you going to punish us?" I shook my head. "I think someone already did." That was the first time he looked at me. Not as an enemy, but as someone who might understand. By the end of that week, I had bandaged James's scraped knee after he tried to climb the garage roof, comforted Lily through a night terror, and stood toe-to-toe with Blake in the kitchen over dinner rules. "They need discipline," he snapped. "They need grace," I answered. "They've had enough punishment." He stared at me like I'd slapped him. Then quietly, he said, So have I. That night, I found Lily on the floor of her room holding a worn-out photo. "My mommy sang to me every night," she whispered. "But Daddy doesn't sing." I took her tiny hand in mine. "Would it be okay if I did?" She nodded. I sang the only thing that came to my heart. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Her grip tightened. That was Mommy's verse. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about surviving a nanny job. It was about healing a family, but healing always stirs what's buried. And what surfaced next, no one was ready for. The weeks that followed tested every part of me. Caroline doubled her efforts. She hired private investigators, leaked stories to tabloids, and painted a picture of Blake as an absent, broken man. And me, a gold-digging stranger. But every time I thought of giving up, I remembered Lily's tiny voice. She stayed. I began documenting everything: progress with the children, therapy notes, even Lily's drawings. We set boundaries, routines, peace in the chaos. One night, James had a nightmare. I found him crying in the hallway. He looked up at me, eyes red. "What if she takes us?" I held his hand tight. "She won't. And even if she tries, I'll still be here." Blake changed too. He started reading bedtime stories, showing up to school events, even laughing again. He said grace at dinner once, something Maria whispered hadn't happened in 2 years. "Lord," he said, "we don't ask for comfort, just courage." And I saw it. Not the CEO, the father, the man grieving in silence. And for the first time, I let myself care without fear. One evening, as the kids played in the yard, Blake turned to me and said, "I was a man who built walls. And now," I asked, "I want to build something else with you." I didn't answer with words. I just took his hand. But then, 2 nights before the final custody ruling, a black SUV parked outside the gate. Inside was a man claiming to be from Caroline's legal team, but he wasn't. He was from the bank. "Mr. Callahan," he said coldly, "your primary business accounts have been frozen." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just the children she wanted. She was going after everything. The financial freeze hit hard and fast. Within days, staff were let go. Deliveries stopped. The once bustling estate fell into eerie silence again. I found Maria quietly packing her things. "You can't leave?" I begged. "I have to, dear, but you were sent for such a time as this." Her words echoed deep. The luxury was crumbling, but the family was finally holding together. Blake sold his sports car, canceled 2 investment deals, even gave up his private office downtown. "I built an empire," he said, staring out at the garden, "but I forgot to build a home." The children noticed the changes. No more fancy meals or new toys. But instead of rebelling, they leaned in. They helped Blake cook simple dinners. We spent evenings with puzzles and old stories. There was no luxury, but there was peace. Caroline wasn't satisfied. She filed another motion, this time claiming Blake's financial instability proved him unfit. The court date was moved up. We had 5 days. 5 days to prove that a family isn't measured in wealth. It's measured in love. We worked night and day. Friends came forward with letters, neighbors, teachers, even a local pastor offered to testify. But still, it felt like a losing battle. On the eve of the hearing, I sat with the twins by candlelight during a power outage. Lily whispered, "Even if they take us, you'll still find us, right?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'll never stop." James added, "God doesn't let the good ones get lost." and I whispered the verse their mother once loved. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. It was time, not just to fight for them, but to finally let go of fear. The courtroom was cold and tense. Caroline arrived in a designer suit, flanked by lawyers and smug confidence. Blake wore a simple gray suit. I sat beside him, my hands clenched, heart pounding. The judge reviewed the case, highlighting the loss of income, the frozen accounts, and the sudden change in lifestyle. Caroline's lawyer stood. These children require stability, not affection from a woman who has hired help. I almost rose to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "Miss Hart," he said, "do you wish to speak?" I stood, knees trembling. I was hired as a nanny, that's true, but I didn't stay because of a paycheck. I stayed when others left. I stayed through tantrums, silence, fear. I stayed because they became mine. A hush fell. Caroline smirked. "So you admit to crossing boundaries?" "I admit to loving them when no one else had the patience to look past their pain." Then Blake stood. His voice was steady, eyes locked on the judge. "I failed, as a husband, as a father. But I am not failing anymore." He paused, then added, "Money built my house. Emma built our home." The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. But before the ruling came, the courtroom doors opened. A young woman entered, holding a folder. "I'm with the probate office," she announced. "We have a signed copy of the will, Hannah's real intentions." She handed it to the judge. Gasps echoed. Inside, it stated that if anything ever happened to both parents, she wished Emma Hart to be considered for full guardianship should she become part of the children's lives. Hannah had known. She'd written it just before her death. By the second week, the house was changing. Laughter began to echo through the halls, soft at first, like it didn't trust itself. Lily started drawing people again. James stopped breaking things just to get attention. Even Blake noticed. One night, he found us in the backyard, the twins chasing fireflies, giggling like the children they were meant to be. "You've made progress," he said, his voice softer than usual. I turned to him. "It's not me. They just needed someone to stay." He looked away. "People don't stay long in this house." "Maybe because no one's allowed to," I replied. For the first time, he didn't argue. He invited me to dinner a few days later, not as a nanny, but as someone he wanted to talk to. He poured wine, asked about my life, my ex-husband, my son, who left at 17 and never called back. "Losing someone who's still alive," I said. "That's a grief no one prepares for." He nodded slowly. "Like watching them slip through your fingers, day by day." That night, we didn't talk about the kids. We talked about guilt, regret, faith, and the terrifying idea of beginning again. The next morning, Lily placed a folded note in my hand. "I think Daddy likes you," it read. "But he's scared." She wasn't wrong, but I was scared too. Scared of falling into something I couldn't control. Scared of caring too much. And scared of what I found in the East Wing. Because curiosity got the better of me. And behind that locked door was something that changed everything. The key was hidden behind a false panel in Blake's office drawer. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. The door to the East Wing creaked open, and the air inside felt frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture, children's books, a small white piano with a cracked key, and photographs, hundreds of them, pinned to the walls, scattered across the floor. Hannah's face in every one, smiling, radiant, alive. Then I saw the journal. It was hers, and inside were letters. Not to Blake, not to the children, to someone named Caroline. I should have told you the truth. One letter read, but I loved him too, in my own way. My breath caught. Caroline wasn't a friend. She was Hannah's sister and Blake's former lover. That night, I confronted him. He didn't deny it. We were young, he said. It ended long before I met Hannah. But when she found out, she never forgave me. I felt like the ground beneath us cracked open. You buried her in this house, I whispered. But you've been buried too. He sat down, hands trembling. I thought I could protect the children from it. From me. That's not protection, I said. That's exile. Then came the storm. The next morning, Caroline showed up at the gate. I recognized her instantly. Same eyes as Hannah, but colder. I want the twins, she said. She left me guardianship in a second will. Blake's face went pale. That will was never signed. She smiled. That's for the court to decide. Suddenly, everything we built was at risk. The children, the peace, even the fragile trust we'd just begun to form. And I knew, if I didn't fight for this family, no one would. Caroline didn't waste time. She filed an emergency petition for custody, claiming Blake was emotionally unstable. And the children were in an unfit environment. Papers arrived the next morning. James overheard the shouting in the foyer. Lily stood on the stairs, holding her teddy bear like a shield. Are we going to lose our home? She whispered. I crouched beside her, held her close. Not if I can help it. Blake was unraveling. Meetings were missed, calls ignored. He stopped sleeping. The calm, calculating CEO was gone, replaced by a man haunted by every mistake he never fixed. I never meant to hurt Hannah, he confessed one night. And now I'm paying for it. I looked him in the eyes and said something I never thought I would. God doesn't measure us by the pain we caused, but by what we choose to do with it. He exhaled sharply. Is that from the Bible? Not exactly, I said, but it should be. We met with lawyers. Maria testified on our behalf. Even the children spoke to the court-appointed counselor. But Caroline wasn't backing down. She arrived at every hearing with documents, videos, twisted truths. Then came her final blow. She accused me of manipulating the children to replace Hannah. She's overstepping, Caroline said, pointing her finger across the courtroom. She's trying to become their new mother. For a moment, I felt shame crawl up my spine, until Lily stood up, walked to the judge, and said with trembling lips, she's not trying to be our mom, but she loves us, and she stayed. The courtroom fell silent. It wasn't over yet, but something shifted that day. And I realized these children weren't just Blake's to fight for. They were mine too.